Good morning. I'm going to talk about the impacts and mitigation strategies that are associated with 3 decades of persistent degassing at Kīlauea. And I'm hoping this is going to set the stage for some integration with future social science studies. Kīlauea is currently erupting from 2 locations. These are the focus of the gas release. It's at the summit of the volcano and on the East Rift. And you can see this haze that's traveling around the island. And this is the volcanic air pollution that's created, moving in the trade wind flow to the downwind area. This gives an idea of how much gas is being released from Kīlauea. These black bars are the gas from the summit, the red is from the rift, and you can see there was this order of magnitude increase in 1983 when this eruption began, and then another large increase in 2008 when the summit eruption began. And air pollution, this volcanic air pollution on the island became an issue in 1986. That's when the East Rift eruption changed from episodic fountaining to continuous release of gas and lava. And this problem, the magnitude of the problem increased in 2008 with the opening of the summit vent. This gives an idea of the cumulative SO2 over the progress of the eruption. You can see the inflection in 2008 when the summit vent opened up. 25 megatons of gas of SO2 have been released. This gives some perspective. Here's the cumulative emissions from Miyakojima in Japan, about the same 25 megatons, but over a much shorter period of time. Very intense release in the beginning, lots of impacts observed. And then a very different style of eruption, Pinatubo, 20 megatons over the first few days of the cataclysmic period of the eruption. And then these are the U.S. anthropogenic, the total U.S. anthropogenic SO2 emissions. It takes about 5 years to reach this same level, these volcanoes. And then if we go back in time to 1783, this is the 8 months of the Laki eruption that released 120 megatons of SO2, and it just dwarfs everyone else. And so as we talk about the impacts and mitigation strategies, it can be useful to keep these relative emissions in mind. One thing I didn't mention was this volcanic air pollution that's being released. The bad actors in that are the sulfur dioxide gas and its oxidation products, so the acid and neutral sulfate. There's also hydrogen fluoride that's released from the emission sources that also winds up playing a role. Now this shows it gives a sense of the ambient SO2 that the community is experiencing here in Pahala. This is the closest downwind community to the emission sources during the prevailing trade wind flow. And what this is showing is the number of days per year that have at least 1 hour that exceeds the EPA 1 hour standard. And this is how the EPA counts these exceedances for the purpose of protecting public health. And you can see that in 2008, when the summit event opened, there was this very large increase, and over 300 days of the year exceeded the EPA health standard. And last few years, things have gotten better. But in order to meet this standard, EPA requires that no more than 3.6 days on average are exceeded each year. And so this is still over 200 days a year. So not only do we exceed this health standard very frequently, but the magnitude of the exceedance is also dramatic. So these are monthly mean 1 hour, monthly maximum 1 hour averages. And here's the EPA 1 hour health standard. Health research in Hawaii does show several effects from the exposure to these high levels of gases and particles. And it was found early, start with people in Hawaii, many people in Hawaii catch rainfall for their domestic water supply. And it was found fairly early in the East Rift eruption that 23% of the water catchment systems that were downwind in West Hawaii had elevated levels of lead in the drinking water. And some of the people that lived in these homes also had elevated levels of lead in their blood. Researchers have also found there have been increases in respiratory symptoms and upper respiratory infections and emergency room visits for respiratory emergencies. And then also that people who are exposed to co-pollutants like tobacco smoke or who are susceptible, like asthmatics, have an even greater challenge. So this is just showing the increase in chronic cough in the asthmatic population with increases in sulfate concentration. This is also apparent in the healthy population, but it's more extreme for asthmatics. The message that is the recommended action if you're living in an area of persistent volcanic pollution has been to limit your exposure. So there are websites that provide information that it's a self-serve, so people go out and get them. And this is a forecast model, a SO2 gas and sulfate particle forecast model. It's known as VMAP. And this day shows 1 hour average forecast concentrations under the trade wind flow. The Department of Health and the National Park Service, they offer 15-minute average near real-time concentration data online for the various sites that are in their network. And all of these products are based on the same color-coded concentration criteria. There are also basic engineering controls that are used at a few places on the island. The National Park headquarters, or the visitor centers, which are located very close to the emission source and have over 1 million visitors a year, when the concentrations of gas outside are elevated, they close these doors, and there's a strong blast of air, downward air, from this blower that helps minimize the infiltration of that outside air as people come and go from the visitor center. And then there's this gas and particle purifier that helps purify the indoor air. This is a gymnasium that's being built in that closest downwind community. And although it was originally supposed to have air handling throughout the building, due to cost and priorities, a small portion of the building is being designed with air handling. The hospital in the same community has been retrofit and has some air handling in place now. And then individuals are using home-based air purifiers that scrub SO2, acid gases, and particles to create a safe room in their home. There's also agricultural impacts. There's burning of both native and horticultural plants. The largest impacts are seen in infrastructure. So fencing, metal fencing and gates that have typically last 15 years or more now are lasting 3 to 5 years. There's also evidence of effects of fluoride in the livestock. That's shown here by this dental decay in this calf. Grass samples and rainwater samples have shown that there are elevated levels of fluoride in both those substrates. These warmer colors are showing, these are grasses of increasing age, and some of these older grasses you can see are above this 20 ppm threshold for fluoride, which is a level where you might start to expect to see some impacts in calves. There has been a disaster designation for the island from 2008 to 2011, And this has allowed ranchers and farmers to take advantage of subsidy programs that cover production losses, but also give them an opportunity to try some novel ranching and farming techniques. So this is an example where a rancher is actually using fiberglass fencing poles rather than the metal fencing. Ranchers have observed mineral imbalances in their livestock. In an environment where there's elevated fluoride and sulfur, this affects the uptake of minerals. So they've had some success in using mineral supplementation. And then there are farmers who have been changing crops to more acid-loving crops like coffee. So flower growers have wound up either going out of business or changing their crops. And then some growers are also watering down their plants after there have been high events of SO2 gas to try and wash the acid off. Or some people are actually relocating their plants to other parts of the island. So just in summary, Kīlauea has emitted a huge amount of gas over the last 3 decades. And Hawaii can serve as a benchmark or an analog for other places that have chronically exposed populations and environments and other long-term eruptions. And then given the dramatic exceedance of traditional health standards, it seems like the hazard and risk messaging, the generic hazard and risk messaging, and also the types of strategies that are being used on the island need to be evaluated. With that in mind, there's going to be a pilot study in early 2015 to actually survey the population and try and find out what sorts of the information resources are actually useful. And since you really can't trust anyone over 30, it's not a surprise that Kīlauea has given a new twist to the eruption, and for the past several months has actually been sending lava flows down to populated areas in the lower Puna District, which is located here. So here's the part of the island that's most impacted by the air pollution problems. And so now we're over here. This is a map of this encroaching lava flow on the community of Pahala. This is a very long flow. It's 20 kilometers from the vent. This red portion is the active portion right now. This has had a stop and start behavior, which has made it very difficult for people in this area. This is aimed for the commercial hub of the town of Pahala, and this is the highway that is the main artery that connects this area to the rest of the island. This area is the fastest growing area in the state, and there's about 7,000 people that are potentially impacted by this lava flow. Here's the outline of the lava flow. Here's the tip of it in the residential area, and it stalled about 150 meters from the road that travels through the village. Some of the impacts, there's been one house burned so far, but the potential for destruction of private and community resources is very high. There's a main utility corridor that runs through this area. This is a power pole that's been affected by the lava flow. You can see the swooping power lines as the pole is burned at the base and is shrinking. There's about 1,700 students that have either had to be absorbed into other schools or are being housed in temporary classrooms in the parking lot of other schools. And adaptations, this is trying to work with utility poles. This is actually a metal utility pole that's replaced a wooden pole. This is wrapped in a heat-resistant material. It's got a cement collar around it, and that contains some insulating cinder here. And here's the encroaching lava flow. This is some aggregate that's being thermally tested on this warm lava flow to be deployed over essential roads after lava is cooled. And then these are these community meetings that were mentioned. There's been a lot of community outreach effort by multiple agencies, and then the use of social media has been both good and bad. There's actually a Kīlauea update app you can get now. And then the air quality issues are burning forest, There's some SO2 being released by the lava flow. And in addition, there's organics from burning of man-made materials like the roads and this pile of tires. And then this is a smoke model that the university basically leveraged. University of Hawaii was able to get this online fairly quickly. It leverages the SO2 and sulfate model. And it provides smoke density and dispersion based on lava flow position and the fuel loading. And there, as of yesterday morning, here's the location of the terminus of the lava flow. And I'll just point out there's 2 new webcams in the last couple days. One looks down at the commercial area in the town where the lava flow is traveling, and the other looks up at the lava flow in this direction, and this is last night coming down. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please hold your questions for